Hello everyone and welcome to the Basic Design Workshop. My name is Jude and today we're going to teach you the basics of model making. So first we're going to introduce to you some of the tools that we use when model making. So your most important tools are going to be your cutters, and we usually use two types, the big size and the smaller size. The big size is usually for big and large cuts that need a strong and sharp blade, and the smaller one is usually for details. And to go along with your cutters, you're going to need some refills and a tool to sharpen your blade. So when cutting with your blade, sometimes the tip of it isn't sharp enough and you're gonna see it in your foam boards. So this is a big issue that students face, and when you cut your foam board and it doesn't look clean, it's mostly a sign that you should sharpen it. So you're going to need to use a tool, and as you can see here, there are some lines, some guidelines of where you can cut your blade. So you're gonna put it till here, and you're going to bring the tool, line it up with the line where you're going to cut, and just break it off. It's very easy, and after you do this, you're gonna see a big difference in your cutting. So the next important tool is going to be your metal ruler. Now this ruler comes in very different sizes. I have the smaller one that I usually use for details, and then a very big one to do the big pieces and cut the base of the model. Now it's very important to get a metal ruler, because any other material is going to injure you, because as you cut along the side of the ruler, if it's not metal and it's not sharp, it's going to slip and cause some injuries on your fingers. So this is very important. And as you've already noticed in the background of this video, I have my cutting mat, which is an A2 cutting mat, and this is the recommended size because it's gonna fit most of your needs. And this is very important because it will protect your surfaces. And as you can see, I have so many scratches and glue stains, and I'm not afraid to stain it as long as it covers what I'm working on. Okay, now moving on to the gluing materials. So first, the most common one is the UHU glue. Now this is very easy to use and it works with almost all materials. However, it's not the most sturdy glue. Now moving on to the white glue. This is very good for not leaving stains on your model. However, it dries really slowly and it needs some time for you to hold the pieces together for it to stick. And then last but not least is the hot glue gun. Now this is very good, it's very sturdy, however it's messy and it doesn't work with every material. And for draft model making, you are going to use these pins. So when you're doing your draft models and you're showing them to your instructor, you won't use permanent glue, because most of the time you're going to need to reassemble it and do some corrections. So for that purpose, we use pins to hold the pieces together, so it can be very easy to disassemble it and just put it back together. Okay, so the tools I mentioned before were all the basics, but now I'm going to give you some extra tools that you can have to help you. So first is the X-Acto knife, and this is very good for sharpening cuts and making openings, because it's very small and it's very precise. And you can also have some refills for the tip. The second one is this circle cutter, and while this is kind of hard to use, it can also be helpful to make quick circle cuts. And then for sandpaper, this is very good to clean up some edges. And last but not least is a glove. This is a glove that I use for cutting some strong materials like the museum board, which I'm going to talk to you about in a second. And sometimes you can get blisters from cutting so many pieces and so many details. So a glove can help, and it's also safe to use this when using hot glue gun. Okay, now moving on to the most important part, which is the materials. Now, here I have 3 materials with me, but with basic design, it's very important and fun to experiment with different materials that you can find in the supply store. But today I'm going to talk to you about the basic and most used materials. So first I have the foam board, which is the most basic and most used material. Now this is very good to make sturdy and right angle pieces, and it's most of the time used to make the bases of the models. Okay, and then we have museum board, which is kind of a harder material to cut because it's kind of like stacked paper together. And this is the material I talked to you about that I use the glove to cut with because it can be a hassle. Now this is an excellent material to make curves and make small openings that are clean. And then a basic material, which is thick paper. Now when you go to the supply store, you can find different types of papers with different textures, and it's nice sometimes to use these for projects that need smaller pieces or for drafts. Here I have two comparisons of the two materials, the foam board and the museum board, and we're going to teach you the technique for making curves later on. But as you can see here with the foam board, since it's a sturdy material, you have to make some cuts with it to make a curve. However, with the museum board, this is without any cuts and it can bend easily, but you can also add some cuts and make it more curved. Okay, so the first step in the model making process is making the base of this model, and we usually do it by stacking a couple layers of the foam board. Now when cutting the foam board, you need to be very precise and patient, and you need to make sure that your blade is sharp, or else your cuts can look something like this, which is not really clean, as opposed to this clean cut. So when starting to cut foam board, first you need to make sure that you trace or mark what you're going to cut. So you get your metal ruler and you make a line. Okay. Then you're going to get your blade, your cutter, and you have to be very careful of holding the ruler and not making it slip, or else you can injure yourself or ruin the cut. So the first step is to go through the first layer of the foam board, which is the paper layer. So we're going to make a light cut. Now this process can take some time, but it's the best way to cut clean pieces. So you're going to go lightly over the first layer, as you can see here. Okay, and then the next time you run the blade through, you're going to cut through the foam part. So you're going to press a little harder. Okay, and sometimes the piece can cut directly, or see here, or sometimes it can still be stuck. So you need to go back and do it one last time to separate the piece. And that's it. Here you can see you made a very clean and very precise cut. And the key part is just to be patient and practice, and the more you do it, the better it will look, because I can assure you, when I first started making models, it looked nothing as this clean, but it just needs some practice and making some draft models that will help you develop your skills. Another thing you should remember when cutting your pieces is to push the blade and angle it towards the ruler, because if you do it straight, sometimes it can veer off the path and make a very uneven cut. So here you just push it against the metal ruler, and that's the nice thing about this ruler, is that it doesn't chip, so your cuts will always stay clean. And yeah, here's the second piece. Okay, so now on to gluing. So I'm going to show you how to make a right angle, and there are different techniques. Now the first technique is just sticking it together, which will show this side of the foam, and it can be undesirable because it's not really clean. But to make right angles, you can use a surface like this and apply some glue on this piece and hold it together to make a perfect right angle. as you can see here, this is the right angle. However, this part of the foam is exposed. So now I'm going to show you another technique called the 45 angle cut. So first you're going to mark your piece, and this is basically where you make two 45 angle cuts and stick them together to make a 90-degree angle. Okay, so for this one, you're going to put the ruler a bit far from the line, and then you're going to angle your blade at a 40-degree angle and bring it across like that. Lean it against the ruler so you have a straight cut, and like this. You just go over it a couple of times, and here you can see the cut that we made. Yeah, so now I'm just going to go over it one last time and separate the piece. Okay, now that I've cut two pieces, as you can see here, when we piece them together, they will make a right angle and the edge is really clean. Okay, so the third technique to making angles is basically you cut open two cuts that are halfway through the foam. So you have to go over lightly, and then you can break it up a little bit, and then you are going to take out this middle piece of foam so you can have some space to bend your foam board. As you can see here, you can make some angles, and the bigger the cut, the more you can bend it, and this is really nice to make these clean and kind of curved bends and angles. And then you can just place some glue in the middle, hold it together for a while, and it will stay put. Okay, now moving on to the museum board. Now this is actually the material that I prefer to use. Even though it takes longer time to cut, it's very sturdy, but also very thin, as you can see. And it can make really nice shapes like curves, and the cutting for making angles and stuff like that is a bit easier. However, you're going to have to remember that it takes a lot of blades, because you always need to sharpen it every couple of cuts, and it takes some time as it's a very hard material. So I'm going to show you how I cut it. You're going to have to be very patient, and it will take a couple more cuts than the foam board, and you're going to apply much more force. With the foam board, it's a bit gentler and more patient, but here, as you can see, I did about 4 cuts, but look at the sharpness of it. And for assembling angles, one way we do right angles with museum board is to cut once or twice. See, this is one time, okay? It's still sturdy. And then you go over it a second time. You align it at the same position. And here, as you can see, you can bend it very easily and glue it to your base however you like, with the angle that you desire. So, and it stays, it doesn't break off or anything. And now I'm going to show you how to make some curves with the same material. Okay, so now as I'm cutting this piece, I noticed that the paper is kind of ripping off. So this was a sign for me to change my blade. And since it's done and I can't really cut long strips with this, I'm going to show you how to replace your blade. So most blades have this piece down here. So you're going to have to pull it out and then carefully slide off this piece And make sure you dispose of your blade correctly. You have to cover it either with some plastic or some tissues so that it doesn't cut through any trash bags. And then you get your new blade. Be careful, it's very sharp. You're going to place it right here and then just place it back in and put the black piece back. And here you go, new blade. It's very sharp and now you can make better cuts. Okay, so while museum board can be kind of bendy, to make a curve that stays in place, you're going to have to make some small cuts through the material. Now, the narrower your cuts are, the more you can curve your museum board. So one way you can do this, sometimes you can just freestyle it and make some cuts yourself. But if you want to expose the cut part in your model, you're going to have to be a bit more precise. So you just go through and you make 1 or 2 cuts. The first one is going to be a bit deeper, and then you make a light cut on top of it so that it cuts through enough, but it doesn't curve too much also. And make sure you apply the same amount of pressure throughout all the cuts so that they all have the same bend, and not so that it all bends like evenly, because sometimes part of the piece can be more bendy than the others. So yeah, you just continue on. And this can be very tedious, but it allows you to make very flexible forms, and it's very important to experiment with these through the basic design course, because you won't be able to do such shapes for some time after that. And the more you do this, the better you will be. And sometimes you can cut without a ruler. And don't forget to not give up when you first start out, because it can be challenging and we've all been through that, but it gets easier and you get the hang of it very quickly. Okay, so now that you're done with the cuts, you're going to start to bend each piece like that. As you can see, it's curving already. So if you want to expose this part, it's very easy to make these curves, but sometimes you want to make this clean surface the outside, and it's also possible. However, sometimes you're going to have to put some extra slits so that it can stay put like that. And as you can see, I accidentally ripped it, so you have to make sure that you're a bit careful with the pressure you apply. And yeah, that's it. And you can apply the same technique with the foam board. However, with the foam board, it's hard to bend it opposite. You're going to have to expose this part to the outside, and as you can see, it's hard to make it look even. So if you want to make curves, I recommend this material or FlexiFoam. Okay, to finish off, I want to remind you to never be afraid to experiment with materials. You can go to the stationery shop and find different things that you can use and can help you build some interesting forms. Now, your projects will be mostly white, so if you get any material that is another color, you can just paint it and make it fit with your model.